Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Hakadash, double honors and salutations to the elders and apostles of Great Stone, to the Akim Akwath, throughout the four corners of the earth, holding on in sincerity and in truth and diligence of mind to the gospel of the Lord Hamashiach Yahushua in these days and times. This is Brother Menashe, the DC Camp, another short lesson for the hopeful elect. Yeah, so this is a lesson I should have done months ago. It's just that when the spirit begins to, bother you, you cannot rest. You start getting hints. Brother start doing lesson, and then you realize that, the spirit, is always going to be there to motivate you, to do a lesson on the topic you've had in mind for months. Just little clues here and there, man. Even with brothers' postings and the sharing of news articles, and realize that wow, it's always good to be lively, in this ministry when it comes to the affairs of the church. So it's always a blessing to have brothers around you, man, because the spirit of the Lord is always going to walk with brothers, and that's how your mind gets refreshed, to continue of this journey, because our people need to be taught. They need to be given moments for them to exercise their faith. So this lesson is just going to go into the Zaquan DC camp, the Zaquan Sap, talked about a very, very hot and disturbing trend that DNA testing, paternity testing, and all that stuff has has a huge what you call it, man, a huge drawback. Especially talk about the France, yeah, a huge drawback that's you know relationships and households will fall through, and that's just one thing you have to realize. If you're a brother that you work in the so-called biomedical field, dealing with all this paternity testing and medical testing and all that stuff, testing for TVs, you know, stuff, physicals for the folks that are doing the CDLs, just things like that. Uh, you just have to remember, man. You have to learn how to keep your mouth shut. That's one thing about this ministry, man. You learn how to tame your tongue, because there's so much stuff you see when you walk in these fields that have access to people's information, and also parts of the things you have to deal with in this ministry. Because as a brother, you're doing all this DNA testing, and you understand that you know paternity, is a hot issue that a lot of men have lost their lives because of unfaithfulness. Even women have lost their lives because of unfaithfulness. That spirit of jealousy is no joke. The spirit of envy is no joke. And when people are not properly educated in the word of the Lord, the word of righteousness, the law, statutes, and commandment of the Lord, Bashim Kakadash, they tend to make the wrong moves. They tend to make huge mistakes that they cannot recover from. That's why it's very, very important. Brothers, learn from experience. That there's certain topics, man, that you can discuss around brothers, but not around the people of the world. The scriptures, it's a secret, you know, to the world, but for the circle of brothers, it is enlightenment. All right, you know exactly why the Lord has kept some people in the dark and some people in the light. So just remember, man, when you get access to this information, when it concerns paternity testing and all that stuff, you shouldn't be discussing it, with folks around you, man. Especially when you have, uh, you know, a drama-filled society. You have to learn how to, control your urge to speak, to say what's on your mind. That's why you gotta pray, Lord Amashak, give you that heavy spirit of self-control, of discipline. So the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 13 says, a tale-bearer revealeth secrets, but he that's of a faithful spirit considereth the matter. All right. So when you're working in all these so-called medical fields, man, have something they call data privacy. You got to protect people's information. That's the reason why this health insurance um, legislation, talk about HIPAA violations and all that stuff. You don't want people's private information being discussed out there. Even when you take training classes, as a security officer, as a human resource employee, even whatever job you are, man, you're bound by the so-called law of this society not to discuss, people's personal business outside of work, all that stuff. If it's a medical field and you're dealing with doctors and you're dealing with the nurses and all that stuff, you can discuss about the diagnosis and all that, you know, and that's all it is. Because when they're doing all these, what you call it, um, compatibility, for transplants, organ transplants, and all that stuff, you you get to see a lot of things. You know, you get to see that who's a match and who's not a match, and then you know that the paternity is off and all that stuff. So you cannot go about talking about oh damn, this dude doesn't know that this child that wants to donate an organ to him is not his child. That is, this young girl is not his daughter, and all that stuff. You begin to wonder, and then you look, you start to look in this because in this ministry you could read spirits. You could tell who's not the man's child and who is. You can always spot it, man. That's the gifts, that the Most High has given certain brothers. You could tell, who the child is, by looking at the father. That's just what it is. A lot of men walking around with another man's child, thinking that the child is theirs. So you just have to learn to keep that information to yourself, man. You don't want no drama because people like to eavesdrop and all that stuff, man. You might be on the phone discussing the matter with your colleague about how to proceed. Boy, God, folks that like to, eavesdrop while you're on your lunch break. And then you get an important phone call. That's why you gotta leave the area, go to a place where you don't have nobody around you when you get that phone call, just to get the details out to your colleagues. Because, you hear a lot of things when people are on the cell phone just talking about work related matters, whether it's classified information or some case going on in the courthouse and all that stuff. So remember, man, Proverbs 11 and 13, a talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. So it's just one of those things. Even if it's a brother in the camp, and the child, it's not his. You have no business discussing it, man. You just let the Lord handle that part. That's one thing in this ministry, that we haven't really talked about. You have no business talking about a child's paternity, you know, especially when you have brothers in the same ministry with you. It's not your it's not your job, man. It's not your lot to be discussing about paternity. That man, you should know Mark, you know, you sure this child is yours and all that stuff. That's not the appropriate thing to be doing in this ministry. You have to learn to shut that Mr. I told you so, you know, vibration. You have to learn to shut it down. So you just gonna have to pray the Lord gives you the courage to suppress that, you know, tail-bearing spirit, man. All right. So now we go to the book of Sirach. Sirach chapter 19. You're going to read from verse 8. It says, whether it be to friend or foe, talk not of other men's lives. And if thou canst not without offense, reveal them not. So this one thing you have to remember, man. Just learn to keep your mouth shut. Okay, learn to pray for that spirit of quietness. Verse 9 says, for he heard and observed thee, and when time cometh, he will hate thee. So that's just the pain, the anger bubbling up once you've spilled the beans, man. You have no time spilling the beans of brother's personal business in this ministry. That's between him and his woman and the Lord. All right. Now, verse 10 says, if thou hast heard a word, let it die with thee, and be bold, it will not burst thee. That's what the Spirit of the Lord helps you handle. Some matters are to be taken to the grave with you. The prophets took a lot of matters, a lot of secrets to the grave with them. It wasn't written down on paper. They knew it, but they never talked about it, and they never revealed it to whoever was around them. That's a spirit you have to pray for, man, that you learn how to hold your tongue. Now, verse 11, yeah, the kickers, the tough precepts that you have to remember. Sirach 19 and 11. A fool travaileth with a word, as a woman in labor of a child. You see that? So that's what you call an emotional driven man. And you can't hold a word of wisdom, in reverence, man. You always got to say something, you know. Always got to reveal other brothers' matters. You talk, 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 talk. That's just horrible, all right? And then verse 12 says, as an arrow that sticketh in a man's thigh, so is a word within a fool's belly. That's all he can think about. I got to say this. I want to say this. I must say this and all that stuff. You know, he's just that's a horrible character, you know, personality to be indulging in, man. So you have to pray that the Lord flush that type of vibration out of your mind, and that you could live out your life in this ministry, without interfering with the bonds of brothers. All right. Now we go to Sirach chapter 20 and then read verse 6. Some men, actually, you know what? Verse 5. Sirach chapter 20, verse 5. There is one that keepeth silence and is found wise, and another by much babbling becometh hateful. All right, so you have to learn, to keep your words, to a minimum, man. Don't be trying to have a discussion, man. Just talk about relevant topics to help the ministry grow, man, to strengthen brothers' faith. You don't want to be bringing up that bitterness, man. Things that can throw the brotherhood into a tailspin. That's not what you're here for, man. Just preach the gospel and leave brother's personal business out of it, all right? Your job is to focus on the words of Yahushai's testimony, man. All right? If the brother's woman is committing adultery and all that stuff, that's not for you to discuss. That's not your business. It's not your place. It's not of your responsibility to bring to the forefront. So just keep that in mind. Now, verse 6 says, some man holdeth his tongue because he had no answer, and some keepeth silence, knowing his time. All right? So remember, keep thy mouth out of other brothers' business. Yeah, it's very, very important, man. You have to learn to be an observer, but not a title bearer, man. Don't just, if you see a woman, you know, in the act of, you know, adultery with another man, don't try to hang around to see exactly, how it's going to end. Just remove yourself from that environment. You've been in this ministry for so long, you know, take your two legs and go in a different direction. Pretend as if you just got a phone call and all that stuff. You know, pretend as if you're going to the bathroom and all that. Pretend as if you're going for a so-called break to get some fresh air. That's all it is, man. Don't try to make yourself obvious in an environment you see a woman committing adultery. Don't even try making eye contact. Just be as if you're not there, man. You know, hurry up and get out of there. That's one thing you have to learn in this ministry, man. You don't want to be hearing what they're saying. You don't want to be hearing what type of music they're playing. You don't even want to, remember what clothes they're wearing. Just get out of there. That's all right. You gotta rescue your innocence. You don't want to be held hostage to your stupidity. All right. So now we get another precept. This is going to be from the book of Second Ezra, chapter 16, and then 52 and to 54. It says, for yet a little while, and iniquity shall be taken out of the earth, and righteousness shall reign among you. So that's just how it is, man. The Lord is going to take care of that part. The part concerning judgment and the revealing of secrets, He will take care of that part. So do not try, to interfere in the Lord's judgment. Just play your role as a as a preacher of the gospel. All right. Now, in verse 53, let not the sinner say that he had not sinned, for Yahweh Bashim Bashim Kakadash shall burn coals of fire upon his head. Okay, which said, the Lord God and his glory, I have not sinned. So it's in the Lord's hands, man. The Lord will be the one to do the judging, not you. Okay? Never bring a matter before the court when the Lord has not put the case on the docket yet. All right, that's just what it is, man. Don't be a lawyer, in a case that concerns you not. So just remember that, man. This ministry is, it's like walking on ice. You have to be careful, man, on where you're treading. Okay. So just to wrap this lesson up, we go to Psalms chapter Psalms chapter 130, verse 3. See what it says. If thou, Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who shall stand? All right. So just remember that, man. You know, we're all sinners before the eyes of the Lord. And hey, you just got to pray that the words of mercy dwell out within you, that the mark of mercy dwell out upon you, man, because when the Lord bringeth his judgment, you don't want to be held accountable for a lie. You know, you don't want to be held um, accountable for bearing false witness. Your past sins and all that stuff, man. You want to be forgiven, for your iniquities, man. That's the reason why you have to trust in the Lord, Yahweh Shai, that your iniquities are forgiven. All right. So don't, upset the apple cart, man. That's one thing you learn in this ministry. So just learn to be quiet, man. Learn to have a quiet spirit, because this issue between a man and his woman is not something to be, toyed with. That's of the Lord to bring judgment, man. So concerning people's paternity, Babakosha, don't make it a topic of discussion, man, about whose child, the man, is this and that, man. It's very disturbing, but you just have to fear the Lord, man. Fear the Lord and learn to observe, His words of wisdom. You don't want to get yourself, in the middle of a storm between a man and his woman, man. It's a horrible place to find oneself. Even the police officers in this society, when you have a domestic call of domestic violence, a lot of cops, get jacked up because they got between a man and his woman's, you know, quarreling hours, man. You know, that's just what happens. That's why a lot of cops get jacked up, man, because they're responding to calls between a man and a woman having a hot feud and all that stuff. So you learn, man. The Lord has given us several examples of how to avoid conflict. So that's the point of this lesson, man. Learn to, eat that bread in quiet. Shalom.